Hey everybody. So there was a comment in one of a video that I posted recently that was asking if I had any tips about memorization. And as a matter of fact, I do. There's a whole method that I take myself through when I really want to have something memorized for performance. Before I get into the actual steps, I just kind of want to talk about my goals for this whole process. And my goals are twofold. One is first to memorize, have the piece memorized, but really memorized. Like I really know how the music goes. So not just muscle memory, which is usually the first form of memorization people will get. They'll just like someday, I mean, if you're like me, someday you get your guitar out and you're kind of lazy, you don't get your music, you just kind of start playing, you realize like, hey, I've practiced this a lot, I can play it. And, my muscles know the motions. That's fine, and that's a great first step, but will always fail you. Well, I shouldn't say always, but the odds that it will fail you in performance or in a higher pressure situation is pretty great. So you want to really get it to the next level where you really know the music and you know how it goes and you know the motions to produce that. So that's the first step, is to just really know it. But the second goal is to have a contingency plan when I inevitably will make the occasional memory slip. Of course, I try my very, very best to not make any. And if I go through this method, often I don't. But, we're only human. Things happen. Even the very best of the best make mistakes and err. Michael Jordan would get boxed out sometimes. Wayne Gretzky would get the puck stolen from him. Julian Bream would have some memory slips. I've seen clips of Eddie Van Halen going to the wrong section of a song. I mean, it just happens to human beings. You get distracted for whatever reason. So if that happens, I want to always move forward in the music. I don't want to get in this terrifying loop of going back and then I'm playing and all I'm thinking about is, well, part of the section's coming up again. Am I going to remember it this time? I don't know. Sometimes you do, and you're like, okay, I dodged a bullet there. But oftentimes you get stuck in this loop. And then what happens is you make a memory slip on just one little note or a little distracting mistake, and then everything after that, pages of music, it's blank, it's gone, as if you've never played it and never learned it. And it's terrible to be in a performing situation, and that happens. So while it's less than ideal, if you have a memory slip, whether you skip a beat, a couple measures, a couple pages, at least you're going to a point further down in the music and you can get to the end and it's not all gone. So those are the two goals that I have for this method of memorization. So the first thing that I do after I work on just getting it in my fingers and having that first level of muscle memory is, with the score, I will read through it right hand alone. And then I will read through it just left hand alone, imagining the proper sound. So if I'm playing right hand alone, I'm looking at the notes and in my inner ear, I'm hearing the piece. If I'm doing left hand alone, I'm looking at the notes and I'm hearing the piece in my head. Okay, if I can do that successfully with the score, then I try it without the score. So the right hand alone, I find, is a very, very powerful memorization tool because you're actually making sound. And it's distracting. If you focus on what the sound is, it's just a bunch of open strings. It's gibberish. It doesn't sound like anything. So you'll get lost, or I find that I will get lost. But if in my inner ear, in my head, the music is so loud that it overrides what the actual open string notes are sounding out, then I can play the piece and I really know how that music goes. The left hand, I do that more to be a completist, the left hand from memory without the score. I find it to be a little less value because one, you can kind of cheat a little bit and like hit the strings hard and kind of make some sound. So you kind of have to watch out for that. And the other thing is, while I've practiced enough to have a pretty high consistency level of placement, so I don't buzz and everything, it's still sometimes the difference between a really beautiful note and a buzzy note or a note that doesn't sound so good is just a minute difference. And so sometimes like I'm practicing, it's like, well, I can't tell, maybe I'm practicing, slightly poor placement. So I find the left hand alone to be a little less value than the right hand alone. I'm going to demonstrate this now. I've got my classical guitar, and I'm going to do this with a beautiful little miniature, the A section of a beautiful little miniature by Francisco Tarrega called Adelita. But you can do this with any guitar, any style of music. I do this like when I want to play like some of those Lonnie Johnson solos, like note for note. I do this method to memorize that. I've used it on rock guitar stuff. So anything that I learn from like a sheet of paper, whether it's a chart or a full transcription or a full score, when I really want to get it memorized for performance, I will go through this whole method. Well, first, let me play just one time through this A section of this little piece so you can hear what I'm working on, and then I'll show you with the right hand alone, then the left hand alone. All right, so that's Adelita, just the A section. So for the right hand alone, again, to you, it's just gonna sound like just me playing a bunch of open strings. But to me, if I do this successfully, I'm gonna be hearing what I just played very loudly in my head. And sometimes I do kind of like air guitar the notes. I'm gonna do that a little bit here. Sometimes I purposely will, have my hand down here and so I can't just like see everything. But I'll do air guitar the notes here. Okay, pretty decent. All right. So I felt pretty good about that, and you'll just have to trust me that in my head, in my inner ear, I heard ba-da-dum, bum, ba-da-dum, bum, not da-da, ra-ra, or whatever, just open strings. Now, I'll show you with the left hand alone. All right, not too bad. Okay, so when I'm feeling pretty good about that, the third thing that I do is a little strange, but I find that it really helps with the pure motor skills of it. And I'm not talking about just the muscle memory that I mentioned earlier. I'm talking about really knowing how these motions with my fingers are producing the sounds that I really want to hear, that I know how the piece really goes. So that's the first thing, is just to really get, the first goal is to really get the motor skills down. The second goal of this is that inevitably when you're playing, especially like with classical guitar, where the audience is supposed to be like really quiet, Someone's going to cough, someone's going to talk, I mean, they mean well. Sometimes you'll hear people like you're playing and you'll hear someone go, "This is a really beautiful piece." And, they mean well. And I'm glad they're enjoying the concert, but it's just, it can get distracting and it can rattle you. So I find that this method also really helps with that, so that if there's some noise, I can just really kind of focus just purely on the motor skills and how they connect with how the piece goes. So to do this, I'll take some earbuds and put those in, which I'll do in a second. And if you know me, you know that I kind of like heavy metal music a lot. And so I'll pick something that's, kind of loud so that it'll drown out the guitar as much as possible. Don't do it too loud, don't harm your hearing. But also I'll pick something that I really like, that's super cool, that can very easily distract me, so that if I start listening to that, I lose my concentration, I don't know where I am in the music. So if I do this exercise correctly, what I'm hearing in my head, the piece, is louder than the actual music that's being played in my ears. So a really good friend of mine, let's make sure I've got the right one here. A really good friend of mine kind of was texting me about Sepultura recently. And so I'm going to listen to I'm going to listen to Territory by Sepultura. And you're just going to have to trust me that I'm listening to it. Maybe you'll hear it faintly through the earbuds from here. I have it kind of loud, but I'm going to hit play on this here and play this A section. All right, I felt pretty good about that. I don't know how it actually sounded. Maybe I buzzed a note or something. I'll check it out when I'm kind of watching this video to make sure there's no bugs or anything in it. But I felt pretty good about that. I felt pretty secure. So those are my methods. Some other things that you can do. I don't like to detune my guitar too much, because then it's always kind of a hassle to get back. But if you're putting new strings on and it's all out of whack, I'll play the piece that way. So it just sounds just horrible. But again, in your inner ear, in your mind, that overrides the actual sound that's coming out of the instrument. So you really know how it's going. One final thing that I'll say, and this is, I don't know if this really works or not, but I do it, is to further solidify that whole idea of being able to move forward rather than getting caught in a loop if a little memory slip does occur, which inevitably, you're gonna have one every now and then, is I'll memorize it backwards. And I don't mean literally backwards. I will take like the last measure or like the last few measures and get those good, and then a few measures before that, and then work backwards that way. It might just be more of a psychological thing that, I work that way, and, technically I've played the later stuff more than I've played the more recent stuff, but I find that is kind of helps me too, rather than starting at the beginning and then working, sequentially through it. So anyways, I apologize, for the video being a little bit longer, but I wanted to make sure that I explained all of these steps. It is kind of a somewhat laborious process, but I think if you just practice it with something and give it a shot, I think you'll find that when you sit down to play it and you're in a kind of a slightly higher pressure situation, whether you're actually performing it for someone or you're recording it, I think you'll find that you feel just a lot more secure, and you can really just play the music and enjoy the music more because you really know how the piece really goes rather than just having muscle memory. So good luck with that. Have fun, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Any tips for memorization? And as a matter of fact, I do. I have a whole